Hey, I'm Elektron, and what is a compressor and how does it work? Well, a compressor is simply this thing that levels out the gain or volume of a sound. Let's simplify that. It takes the loudest parts of a sound, which we're going to refer to as peaks, and levels them down to match the quieter parts of the sound so that everything we are hearing is as close to being the same volume as we can get it to be. It works kind of like this. Say our audio signal is represented by these 5 stickmen. These stickmen represent the audio signal, and they clearly vary in height. I want them to be as close to the same height as I can, and I'm going to use a compressor to make that happen. Remember, these stickmen represent an audio signal with variations in gain, or simply put, variations in volume. So I'm going to draw a bar here which represents the threshold. Compressors have thresholds which tell it when to start limiting the size of those loud peaks, or in other words, leveling the louder parts of the sound out with the quieter parts of the sound and making it a more even signal. So I have these stickmen and I want to use my threshold to make these taller guys as close to the same size as these smaller guys. So I'm going to turn my threshold down to the size of the smaller guys, or in other words, the quieter signals. So now I have my threshold set, and everything above this threshold I want to match the size of these smaller guys. That's not quite ready to happen yet. Yeah, we have our threshold set, but we haven't told it how strong we want it to work. We're going to use a function in our compressor to decide how hard these stickmen are going to be downsized, or in other words, compressed. The function we're going to use is the ratio knob. The ratio knob will decide how hard these larger stickmen that all stand above this threshold are compressed. A lower ratio will probably look something like this. You might ask, well, why are the larger stickmen not this size instead of this size? Because the threshold's here. Well, that's just how a lower ratio works. A compressor has the ability to slightly level out the audio signal so that everything is smooth and dynamic ranges in audio signals can still exist. But what if we really do want these larger stickmen to level out with the smaller guys? Can we do this with a compressor? Increasing the ratio a little more will probably do something like this. Make these stickmen even smaller. Increasing the ratio a little more will make the bigger guys even smaller. However, increasing the ratio too much will lead to something like this. It will squeeze the stickmen as much as it could and then resort to chopping the rest off, which in this case is called limiting. So if you've ever heard of a limiter, that's what a limiter does. It's a compressor basically with a really high ratio. Okay, so now we're on to the attack knob and the release knob. And now we're going to step off of the stickmen and look at an actual audio signal. This is a signal from an actual loop from the loop library in Logic Pro X. So I already drew a line here. This yellow line is going to represent our threshold, and then I can visually sort of explain what exactly an attack and release knob do. This gets pretty tricky because it's one of those things you just have to mess around and listen to what actually happens for yourself, because it's really hard to explain what this is actually doing, but I'm going to try my best. So I'm going to lower this threshold here. If I was actually compressing this, I would attempt to lower this threshold to these lower peaks so that these higher peaks can match those lower peaks, especially if this was an acapella here. If we were looking at an acapella, that's what I would be doing. Drum loops are a little bit different, but for the sake of this video, I am going to use this drum loop. So this is our threshold. Now, here's where it's going to get a little tricky. I'm going to draw in red every time this threshold is being engaged. And every time this threshold is being engaged is when some signal passes over it. So kind of like that. Please excuse my horrible drawing. I'm a music producer, not an illustrator. So that's every time this is being engaged, this threshold is being engaged. So what does an attack knob do versus a release knob? Well, first you got to understand that a compressor sees this thing moving. So this loop is always moving through the compressor. It's actually going this way. So it starts here and then it goes this way at some speed. And since an attack knob is in milliseconds, that it has to do with the speed at which this loop goes through the compressor. So if I have a fast attack, let me get my eraser here. and just redraw this. So let's redraw what this is actually doing during a fast attack. So this threshold will maybe end here, but if we have a fast, or how about let's do a slow attack first for the sake of simplicity. A slow attack would probably look something like that. So this threshold here now looks like this instead of just that straight line that we just learned about. And if we had a slow release, it would look something like that, and then this threshold would actually not really be there until it has to be there. So this would actually get erased, kind of like that. So now let's see what other functions this threshold can give us, or the attack and release knob. So let's go to this signal. We know our threshold's here, so it's going to activate here, kind of like that. But let's just say we have a faster attack this time. So we're gonna move this up to there, and we can put a really fast attack on it. It'll probably look something like that. So you can see this one's more on a slant, and some signal gets out a little bit here. But this time we have a fast attack, and no signal is going to seep out the front of it. And let's say we have a fast release. Kind of maybe do something like that. So that's kind of what an attack and release knob does. So let's draw it again. Over here. Mind you, everything above this threshold is getting compressed. So it's the sound is getting smaller or quieter. Or in other words, its gain reduction it's reducing its gain. So let's draw one more. This time let's do a sorry about that. Let's do a slower attack. Maybe something like that. And then a fast release. That's a super fast release. Compressors probably won't be that fast. But you could actually, some compressors will actually go that fast, depending on what kind of compressor you have and what your reasons for going that fast are. But compression will actually look like that. So you can see some of the signal is not getting compressed, and this back signal is getting compressed. The signal in the back of this kick drum is being compressed, and that is kind of what a compressor would be used for sometimes, to make that punchy transient shine through and then compress the end of it, and it creates a punchier percussive sound. So that is my explanation for how an attack versus a release knob works, with the strength of the ratio and the basically limitations of a threshold. So you set the threshold, you decide how strong the threshold is going to act with the ratio, and then you're going to decide how fast it's going to act with the attack knob, and how fast or slow it's going to end with the release knob. So that is how a compressor works. I hope you learned something from this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. Until next time, my name is Alex Rome from AlexRomeSound.com, and stay tuned for more awesomeness.